In this video, we'll be taking a look at audio recording and editing basics in Studio One. Hi folks, I'm Mike and I hope you're well. Now Studio One is really powerful when it comes to recording and mixing audio, and it's going to be one of the main reasons why most of you have got hold of this awesome DAW. Now in today's video we're going to cover the absolute basics. We're going to start off with setting up your system and then a song ready for recording audio. Then we're going to actually record some audio and finish off with some editing. And although I'm only going to show you a few editing tools, it'll be that which covers 90% of what you do in the studio. So please stick around for all of that. But before we do get started, if you like this kind of content, all about home recording, DAWs, gear reviews, plugin reviews, that kind of thing, then please do subscribe and ring the bell on YouTube so that you're notified about my future videos. Now let's get started with recording some audio. So let's start at the very beginning. We're looking at the Studio One start page here, and the very first thing I want you to make sure of is that you've got an audio device available, because we're going to be recording audio. Now if you look at the center here, right down at the bottom, you can see I've already got my Presonus Studio 192 showing as configured and available there. Now if you've got nothing there, or you've got the wrong audio device showing, you'll want to click on Configure Audio Device, and that brings up this dialog box here, and next to where it says audio device there's a drop down list there of ones available on your system. Now there's no good if this isn't available on your system before you open up Studio One trying to make it work here. You'll need to make sure that your operating system can see your audio device first before you start up Studio One. The other thing I'd like to mention here is if you're trying to use either the Windows audio or if you're on a Mac, the internal Mac audio, do understand that you're only going to get so far. It's going to be quite difficult to record, especially multi-track audio, using the internal sound on your system. You really do need a dedicated audio interface. And that's what I have set up here. That's the Studio 192. So I'll just click on OK. Now the next thing I'm going to do is create a new song. So I go up to the top left here, click on create a new song, and under the styles tab I'm just going to make sure I've got empty song selected. So we're going to start off with a clean slate here, and I'm going to give it a name over here. I'll call it Guitar Jam. Those of you who've watched the channel before know that typing is a bit of an issue for me. I'm typingly challenged. Is that a way of saying it? I don't know. Anyway, Guitar Jam, that's a giveaway about what we're going to do in this tutorial. I'll click on OK. And that creates a new blank project. And I'll just get rid of the browse panel here by clicking on the browse button in the bottom right hand corner. So we've got a nice clean screen. And then I'm going to add an audio track. Now there's a couple of ways you can do this. You could click on the big plus icon here, and that's going to bring up this dialog box to add tracks. Now that gives you a whole bunch of options which actually you can change later. So I'm not going to use that method. I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to right click in the left panel over here, just on that blank space. I'll right click and that brings up this little pop-up. Now I've got a couple of options here for adding an audio track. One to add an audio track mono and the other one stereo. Now the difference being is that one type of track is just going to use one signal, and the other one is going to use two inputs and combine them together to make a stereo signal. Now we're going to be recording an electric guitar which just uses one audio cable. So this is going to be a mono track, and I'll click on that, but I'll talk a little bit about stereo tracks a little bit later. Now the next thing I need to do is make sure I have an input selected. Now it's automatically selected one for me there, one called input left. If I click on that little drop down there, I'll see my choices of inputs available. Now you may have none there yet if it's not been set up, or you may not have all of them available if it's not been set up. And let me show you how to set that up. If we go to the bottom, audio input output setup, we'll click on that. That brings up this dialog box. Now this shows me the ones which have already been set up. I'm just going to remove the inputs I've got set up so I can show you how to add new ones from scratch. It gives me a warning there. I'll just get rid of that. So now I have no audio input set up in Studio One. But what I can see here is all of my available inputs numbered across the top on my audio interface. Now in this audio interface I've got 26 available. You may only have 1 or 2 or 4 or 8, what have you, doesn't matter too much. Now if you've only got one input on your audio device, then you've only got one possible choice, and that is to add a mono source. So we'll click on add, mono there, and then you can go ahead and select your input. Now I'm going to make my first one the input one on my device, but I could choose any of the inputs on my device like so. But I will select input one because that's where I'm going to plug my electric guitar in. Okay, now if that's all I want to do, then I can just click apply, and you'll see that changes from grayed out to a sort of a solid M there, showing that input. I can also rename it if I wish, but I won't do that right now. Now, the other option I mentioned earlier was to have stereo inputs. Now, stereo inputs, of course, are two inputs combined, one for the left channel, one for the right channel. So if I wanted to add a stereo input, I'll click on Add Stereo, like so. Now it's automatically selected inputs 3 and 4 for me on my audio interface. I don't actually want that. So you can see if I click around, it'll actually choose pairs for left and right there. I'm going to select 1 and 2 for my stereo input, like so. I'm actually going to rename it there to stereo in, just so that's available if I want it. Okay, now I could go ahead and continue to add inputs if I want to, and I've got quite a few available, but you don't have to add them all. You can just use as many as you want for your particular project. So once that's done, I can click on apply, and you'll see that that stereo input there is now available. Click on OK. So now I will go up to the drop down box there, so I can select an input, and I'm going to select input 1. Now you can see the stereo input that I created is not there, and that's because this is a mono track. It would be there if it was a stereo track. So I'll select input 1, that's the only one I've got available, and that's where I'm going to plug my guitar in and start playing it. So I'll go ahead and plug my guitar in, and I'll see you in a moment. Okay, so I've got my guitar plugged in, as you can see, and I'm going to start off by setting up my recording level. Now this is going to be different for each of you because it depends on which audio interface you're using. Now for most of you, you're going to be setting this level using an actual hardware or a physical knob on the front of your audio interface. It may be called an input gain or just gain, something like that, but that's how you're going to be setting it. Now for some of us, there's an option to do it in software as well. It's not such a common option, but that's what I'm going to be using today, simply because I can just show you on the screen how I'm setting up my input level. Now I must stress, this is not a part of Studio One. This is a part of the software which came with my audio interface. So I'm going to bring that up now just to show you, and you can see the first channel there, that's actually where my guitar is. So I'll just play that for a moment. And it's very quiet at the moment, so I need to push the gain up. So I'm just going to push it up a little, around about here is where I think it's going to be, and I'll play again. Now you can see it's peaking around about minus 12 dB. I'll show you again. And that's where I kind of like to set my levels. There's a whole big reason for that, which I won't go into now, but I will mention that if you're coming from an analog recording background, then this may seem a little bit strange to you. Don't worry about it. You don't need to set up a loud level like you used to have to with analog recording. It's a little bit different in the digital realm. Now, I should also stress as well that when you do this, it's handy to play the loudest part of your song. And that's really, I mean, this is just going to be a short piece, so that's the loudest part that I was playing there. So I've now got my level set up, so I can just get rid of that interface and go back into Studio One. And the next thing I want to do is arm my track for recording. So I'll just click on the recording arm button there. I'll click on that, and you'll see that a couple of things got highlighted. First of all, it's highlighted for recording, but also this monitor, this little speaker icon, got switched on as well. And that means we're listening to the audio through Studio One. Before, when you were hearing my guitar, it was just from my audio interface. Now, something strange is going to happen now when I play this guitar. Have a listen. Can you hear it sounds like it's got a little sort of a delay effect on there? That is called latency. What you're hearing there is the original audio from my interface and the sound of the audio after it's been processed by Studio One. Now, if it's really, really large, it's quite distracting to hear that. So you're going to need to change some settings on your interface if that's a really long delay. Now, you'll do that by going up to the Studio One menu up here and then selecting options, or you could just press Control, comma. That brings up this interface here. Now, the main thing which is going to affect the length of time between you playing your note and it coming back through to your headphones or your speakers is the device block size here. Now, things get a little tricky. It's going to depend on your audio interface how well this performs. If you set this very, very long, say down here, 1024 samples, it's going to be a very long delay, but it's going to mean your system is very, very stable. Now, if you have it set like I do, quite small, to 128 samples, I'm only getting around about 6 milliseconds of delay there, which is workable. But my system may become unstable. Now, I happen to know with mine, of course, that it isn't at 128 samples, but it does stop me from going down to 64, 32, or 16, where there'd be virtually no discernible latency, but I may find that my system becomes a little bit unstable, or there's pops and clicks in the recording. So you're going to have to experiment with that yourself. Now, there's a whole bunch of other settings in Studio One related to this, but I'm not going to go into those today. Your core setting would be this one, the device block size. So you need to go ahead and set that up to something which you think is working for you, and then you can click on OK. Now, there's another significant thing about this little monitoring icon here. I could, if I just want to get rid of that latency sound, just switch that off, okay? And then I'll just be listening to my guitar through my audio interface. It'll sound like this. And you may say, well, Mike, why not just go ahead and record like that? And I could. There's many occasions when I'm recording audio where I just listen to the sound coming through my audio interface. So I'm not hearing any latency at all. Now, this is something that may or may not be available on your audio interface. You'll want to look up to see if it's got direct monitoring or not, that kind of thing. But most of them these days have that option available. There's one big downside to that, especially when you're doing something like recording electric guitar, and that is if you choose to put any effects on this now, which I'm going to in a moment, you won't be able to hear those effects. To hear the effects, you need to have that monitoring switch on, like so. So for this particular track, what I'm going to do is this. I'm actually going to keep that monitoring switch on, but so I don't hear that latency, I'm going to go back to my audio interface again, and I'll just bring the dialogue up for that, or the UI up for that, and I'm just going to mute that channel so that it can't be heard, okay? And now what we will be hearing now is only the processed sound through Studio One. Let's have a listen. Okay, so now in a moment I'm going to show you how to go ahead and just add some basic effects, especially for electric guitar. Now, if you're not using electric guitar, if you're just using some other audio instrument or a voice or something like that, that's okay. You can still experiment with using some real-time effects. But before we do that, I just want to set up the tempo and the metronome for the song, because that's what we're going to be playing along with. So I want to make sure that my click can both be heard and is playing at the correct tempo. So here in Studio One, right at the bottom to the right of the transport buttons there, we can see a little section which is about the metronome and the key and the tempo, etc. So above where it says the word metronome, there's a little triangular icon. If you click on that, it turns blue, and that means the metronome can be heard. You can also toggle that using C on your keyboard like so. And I want to make sure that I can hear it, and I'm going to press play over here in the transport controls, or you can press space on your keyboard as well so that we can hear the metronome. Okay, and that's too slow for me and a little bit quiet as well. Let's deal with the actual tempo first. So over where it says tempo, you can either click on the numbers there and type in a new tempo if you've got a specific tempo in mind, or you can click on the word tempo for a little while and it'll automatically determine the tempo for you. I'm going to do that, so let's go. And you can see it's settled on around about 113. I'll play that. Okay, I think that's going to be fine. And I also just want to make it a little bit louder. So to do that, I'm going to go right to the right hand side and click on this mix button over here. That's going to bring up my console interface or my mixing interface. And all the way over to the right hand side where the master fader is, in the middle, just above the master fader, is this little icon which is to do with the click volume. If I hold down my left button on my mouse over that icon, I can then adjust the level of the click. So I'll put it all the way up to full there, and I'll have a listen again. And I think that should be fine for now. So I'll just get rid of that mix interface by clicking on that button again in the bottom right hand corner. And I'm just about ready to start recording this guitar. But as I say, I want to put some effects on it. So I'll show you how to do that next. So as I say, I'm not going to record this guitar drive. I'm going to put some real-time effects on it before I start recording. Now I'm going to do that by going up to the eye icon, which stands for inspector, just above the tracks view there. I'll click on that, or you could press F4 on your keyboard as well. Now if I go down towards the bottom of the inspector there, I'm going to click on the plus next to where it says insert. So I'll click on the plus icon, and that brings up a list of audio effects I've got on my system. Now you may have way less than this. I've got quite a collection here, but I'm going to be using one which comes with Studio One Professional, and it's called Empire. So I'll scroll down to the Presonus folder here, and you'll see it's the first one there because they're in alphabetical order. So I'll click on Empire, and that does insert that audio effect into the chain there. So I'm going to close the inspector by clicking on that eye icon again. Now I'm going to start off by using a preset in Empire. So I'll go to the top here where I can see a list of presets. Click on that. I'm going to go down to the clean folder, and then I'm going to click on Charlie Sheen. I quite like this preset here. So I'm all ready to go. Let's just have a listen to that. And I think that sounds absolutely fine for now. So I'll go ahead and I'll start the recording process. Now, before I actually start recording, I just want to name my track. It's currently called track 1, which is the default name. Now, if I leave it like that and record, then the clips that are created will also be called track 1, etc. And it's hard to tell later which one is which. If I name it now, then those clips will be appropriately named as well. So I'm just going to double click on that and change it to guitar. Like so. Now all of my clips will be called Guitar 1, etc. You can change them later, but it's kind of a hassle, so I like to do it right now. Now I'm going to start recording by hitting either on the record button on the interface here, which is amongst the transport controls there, or my preferred method is to actually hit asterisk on my computer keyboard, and that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to leave it a bar or so before I actually start playing. I like to create a little bit of space at the beginning of my tracks, and wish me luck. So I've recorded my guitar, and I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. I'm going to start off by disabling the recording on that track. So I'll just click on that record icon there so I don't record over it accidentally. And I'm just going to switch my metronome off by clicking C on my keyboard to toggle that off. And then I'm just going to drag out the bottom of the track there to make my waveform a bit bigger so we can all see what's happening. And I'll just move the plugin out of the way down there. Now let's have a listen to that. I'm just going to move the playhead to just where the guitar starts by clicking on the ruler at the top there. That moves the playhead, as you can see there, and I'm going to click space on my keyboard to play. Now, we can hear the guitar with the effect on, but the effect itself was not recorded. The actual dry guitar was recorded, and the effect is being applied every time we click on play. So I'll bypass the effect by deactivating it here. I'll just click on this little icon, and we'll play again, and you'll hear just the raw guitar. So it is important to understand that the effects are real time. If I switch it back on here and choose a different preset, I'll go down to say, I don't know, Tremolo King. Let's try that one out, and I'll play again. So that's the power of real-time effects. We can adjust them after we've done the recording. So I'm just going to move that back to my Charlie Sheen clean, and I'll just close off that interface. And next, I'm just going to show you how to do some basic audio editing. Okay, so we're going to finish off with some basic editing, and I'm only going to use 2 of the editing tools available here, but I can promise you it will make up about 90% of the edits that you do in Studio One. Now you can see some of the editing tools in the toolbar at the top here, and with each of these tools, if you hover on them, you can see a number in square brackets, and that tells you which number you can press on your computer keyboard as a shortcut to select that tool. So we'll be using the arrow tool here, which we'll press 1 on the keyboard to select, and we're also going to be using the split tool, which we're going to press 3 on the keyboard to select. Now I'm going to start off with that split tool, and I'm going to do some cutting, and I'm also making sure before I do this first cut that I have snapping turned on. So you can toggle snapping on and off there by hitting N on the keyboard or by clicking on the icon at the top there. So with it switched on, I'm going to go to the beginning of the second bar, and I'm just going to click there to cut there. Now, because I had snapping turned on, it's done it exactly at the beginning of that second bar. Now, I want to cut out a 4-bar section, so I'm going to go ahead 4 bars to the beginning of the 6th bar there and do another cut there. Okay, that's all well and good. Now I'm just going to go back to my arrow tool by clicking 1 on the keyboard, and I'm going to make a space of 4 bars by looking at this last clip here. I'm just going to drag it over by 4 bars. Again, with snapping turned on, I can make sure I snap exactly to the beginning of the 10th bar there. So I have a 4-bar gap, so I'm going to select the first 4-bar section there, and I'm going to click Control C on my keyboard to copy, and then I'm going to move my playhead to the beginning of the 6th bar there, and I'm going to press Control V to paste that section in there. Okay, so when you go to paste something which you've copied, you need to make sure that the track is selected that you want to copy and that your playhead is in the position where you want to copy it. Okay, so now we have that first section repeated once, and there's going to be a join there. Now, if you're lucky, it'll sound just fine, but I bet we won't be lucky. So I'm going to go just before that join there, set the playhead there, and I'm going to click play. Let's have a listen. Okay, and there's a little click or a snap that you can hear there where the guitars are joined up, and I don't want that, so I need to get rid of it. And there's a few different ways I can do that, but I'm going to start off by moving my playhead to where that join is, and then I'm going to zoom in. Now I'm zooming in by hitting E or clicking E on my keyboard, okay? You can zoom in with E and you can zoom out with W. Like so. And I'm going to go almost all the way in. In fact, that's the closest I can go, I think. And you can see there the waveform. I hope you can see that there. And you can see it's on its way up and then on its way down, and it abruptly ends there on that 6th bar, and the new waveform abruptly starts there. And that's why we're getting that little click sound. Ideally, what we want to do is either have those lines kind of join up, or even more ideally, do the cut at a point where they're crossing over the 0, or the center 0 part there, okay? It's not very likely we're going to be lucky with that, but let's try. So I'm going to make sure that I've got the arrow tool selected, which I have, and that I'm moving down towards the bottom half of where these clips are. If I go to the top, you'll see that the icon's a little bit different, moving from left to right. It denotes that I'm going to be dragging the edge of one clip or another. But down the bottom, I can actually drag the join, okay? So I'm going to make sure snapping is off, and then I'm going to drag that join around. Now, it's pretty hard to find a point where they're both at 0. So I'm just going to choose a point here where they kind of join up there. Now, it's more than likely that this is going to sound reasonably okay. So I'll zoom back out again, set my playhead back here, and let's have a listen. Definitely the click has gone there. I'm not sure it sounds all that natural. So there's 2 questions there. There's a technical issue of getting rid of the click, and then there's kind of getting a more natural sound. So let's have a look at a couple of ways I'll try and make that more natural. The first thing I like to do is have a little bit of an overlap sometimes. So I've zoomed in here. I'm going to select the first clip, and I'm going to see this triangle right at the top right hand corner. That's for us to drag out a fade. I'm just going to create a little fade there. Now, It may look big enough on the screen, but it's really actually half a millisecond or something like that. So it's really, really small. And then I'm going to do the same with the other one. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is just drag this one over so that it kind of overlap like so. Okay. It can just be roughly like that is fine. Okay. And that means that they're just slightly overlapping and that there's a fade in and fade out. Okay. So let's zoom back out again and have a listen. Similar result to last time. So that's one way that you can get rid of those sort of clicks, is have little fade ins and outs and have a little bit of overlap. Okay. And we can still drag that join around. You see that if I've got my cursor there, so I can still find a nice place. I could even put it back on that bar line if I wish. Let's have a listen to that. Yep, a little bit more. Let's just zoom out a bit more so we can hear it. Just scroll over. And that's not too bad. Now, another thing that I would do, and I've been holding off on this because it's probably what I would actually do in real life, is look for a point. Now that I've done those little fades, is look for a point where it's a little bit more natural. And that would be before the note actually gets hit. So what I'm going to do is actually drag this out over here. Okay. This is a point where they're both basically at 0, and I'm going to hear the natural beginning of that note there. Okay, so let's zoom out, have a listen. Okay, and that's absolutely fine. No kind of clicks or anything there, so that sounds nice. And then we'll do the same to the second join. I suspect we've got the same problem. Let's have a listen. Oh, not too bad. We just about got away with it, I think. Let's just zoom in and take a look. Yeah, that one's pretty good. I might just do it anyway because I'm pedantic like that. We'll just drag that over so we've got a bit of a crossover. I don't mind that at all. I might actually just drag that over there. Okay, we'll have a perfect join there. So that is how you get joins without pops and clicks. And that's a really important part of editing. Let's have a listen to that second one again. Absolutely fine. Now, another really common thing to do is to tidy up the beginnings and the ends. And you'll recall at the beginning I did a cut here and it's left this area here at the beginning with basically nothing in there. Now, sometimes you're going to have a little bit of noise in there. If it's a singer, you might hear them shuffling around. On guitars, you might hear little pops and clicks. What I'm going to do is just select that and I'm going to hit delete on the keyboard to get rid of it. But that's going to leave a slightly unnatural beginning to our track. Let's have a listen. Yeah, we've got a click again and it just sounds a little bit unnatural. So what I would do in a case like this is zoom in and I'm just going to drag the edge of it out like so. Yeah, just to there is fine. Maybe do a little fade in if I really want to. And then let's zoom out again, have a listen. Okay, just nice and silent beforehand, and then it comes in with that guitar. And the other thing we do is the ending. Now, often right at the end of a track, we'll have some kind of fade out like this guitar. Now, depending on the situation, as it gets towards the end of that fade out, you probably hear some little noises, someone shuffling around, or the point where the guitarist takes his fingers off the strings like I do here. You can just about hear that there. Now, you may want to keep that in, but if you don't want to keep it in, what you can do, I'll just turn snapping on again here, is I'm going to drag to say this point here, the end of this 16th bar, and I'm just going to cut it off there so I don't hear that shuffle. But I'm going to have a slightly abrupt ending. Let's have a listen. You hear it sort of suddenly ends there. So I'm going to do a fade out again, but much longer this time. I'm just going to drag that triangle there at the top right hand corner and drag it out. And you can see the waveform changes as I do it. And that should leave a nice natural fade out. Without any kind of clicks or shuffles or anything like that at the end. Now you can make changes to the nature of that fade if you wish. You can start to drag around points in the middle of it like so. And that can make quite a big difference, the nature of the fade outs there. And also I should lastly mention with any of these clips, I'll just zoom out, that you can change the clip's level by clicking on this center box here. Okay, so that combined with your fades means you can do quite an awful lot with your clip there. Okay, and that's the basics really of audio editing. So if something for you didn't go as planned, or you're confused about something I showed you in this video, then please do ask in the comments down below, and myself or someone else will try to help you out. And remember, there are absolutely no stupid questions. There's many things are not clear when you're just starting out with recording on a DAW. Now, if you did like this video, you can help me out by making sure you hit the like button. That tells YouTube that other people should see this video as well. If you didn't like this video, make sure you hit the dislike button twice. And if you do like this kind of content, then make sure you subscribe. Do it now. Go on. Good, thank you. And ring the bell on YouTube so that you are notified about my future videos. And I'll see you in the next video.